Hi, my name is Dr. Tracy Mars, and today I'm here to talk to you about perspective, empathy, and otherness. My presentation is titled Reclaiming Medusa, a look at otherness in storytelling. So that brings us to Medusa, where I started. Medusa is a very popular character in Greek mythology. She's appeared in many movies and video games, comic books. She's very much a part of popular culture, and her prominent feature is her hair is snakes. Many other things might be different. Sometimes she's scary, sometimes she's beautiful, but in all the stories, her main feature is she has snakes for hair and can turn anybody into stone. So I decided to do a little bit of research on Medusa. I wanted to write a story about who she was before she became Athena's priestess. And what surprised me was Medusa was not a mortal girl. Medusa is a granddaughter to Gaia. Gaia is the earth, and Gaia is also the grandmother to Athena. But the difference is they come from different grandfathers. So Athena, her grandfather is Uranus, the sky. Medusa, her grandfather is Pontus, the sea. And Medusa has a lot of family. Most of them live in the ocean, and many of them are the monsters that appear in literature that are slayed by heroes like Hercules, Jason, Perseus. So that's kind of where Medusa's family comes from. And it makes me kind of wonder if Medusa's family are the monsters that are slayed by the heroes. Medusa's family comes from the Pontus side, and they are the ones killed. Athena's family comes from Uranus's side, and they are the ones that order the killing or do the killing. So it seems a little bit more complicated that Medusa would be in Athena's temple. And it almost makes me wonder, what was her relationship within her family? Did she could she have possibly been there for her protection in the human world, or could she have been there as a spy for her family? Did Athena know who she was? Uh, it makes it so that there's a lot more mysteries to uncover with Medusa and her family. So, journey to the heart of Gaia. So, to get to Medusa, I kind of had to understand more about her grandmother. So, in the beginning, there is chaos. There's nothingness. And from nothingness comes Gaia, Tartarus, Eros, Erebus, and Nyx, also known as Earth, the underworld or deep abyss, desire, the shadow or darkness, and night. So, Gaia is said to have birthed the Urea, Nisoi, Uranus, and Pontus without love. And when some people read without love, they believe that means without a father. But I think the story is a little bit different. I think that Gaia created the Aurea and Nisoi from herself. Aurea and Nisoi are the mountains and the islands, and so they are just a part of Gaia. She wanted to create something new, and so when she created the Aurea and the Nisoi, they still were part of her. So she needed something else outside of her. Instead of without a father, I say without love. Gaia went to Eros, desire. She wanted somebody to desire her, to hold her, to surround her in his arms. And so was born Uranus, the sky, and the sky held Earth. But as we know in the stories, Uranus was a bit too much in love and desire with Gaia. And every time a new child was born, he would bury that child somewhere hidden into Gaia because he was jealous of the offspring. And so um, the youngest of the offspring with Uranus, Kronos, castrated Uranus, and he was no longer able to give Gaia offspring, and so was created Pontus. And I believe what Gaia saw was she had created Uranus with Eros, and Uranus was so full of desire and so full of Eros, so full of passions, so full of too much of that. And so she went to Erebus. Erebus is the opposite. He's the shadow. He's darkness. He's cool, rational, reasonable. And so Pontus is the ocean. And the children she made with Pontus become the creatures that live within the ocean. So with Gaia, she has the Cyclops, the 100 handed, 50 headed, and the Titans. Excuse me. With Pontus, she has Nereus, the old man of the sea, Thomas, the mysteries of the sea, sorry, Phorcys and Ceto. These two create the monsters of the sea, and Eurybia. And she's sort of like the constellations and forces in the sea. And I want to pay special attention to Phorcys and Ceto. Those two become the parents to Medusa and her younger sister, Echidna. And now Echidna is very important because she and Gaia's youngest child, Typhon, who she has with her other brother Tartarus, Echidna and Typhon have many, many children, and these are the children that we've heard in stories like Hydra, Ladon, Cerberus, the Nemean lion, Chimera, Sphinx, just to name a few. And all of these monsters end up becoming killed by heroes. So here's just a little bit of our family tree here. So, like I said, in the beginning, there was nothing, there was chaos. And from this chaos came Gaia, Earth, and the underworld, Tartarus. Gaia first creates the mountains and the islands from herself. Next, with Eros, we have Uranus. We have the Cyclops, the 100 handed, and the Titans. So these are her direct children with Uranus, the sky. And these are the offspring that live mostly on the earth, in the sky, and in the earth. And as we know, the Titans, God gave us the Olympians, and the Olympians created the mortals through Prometheus. And then again, here we have Pontus and this family here. And the thing that with Tartarus, her child with Tartarus was made with love by the help of Aphrodite. And so here we have her first child, her first offspring were made with Eros, desire, and her last ones are made with love, Aphrodite. But she did it out of anger because Gaia basically becomes angry with every ruler that goes through. She becomes angry with Uranus for um, bearing their children. She becomes angry with Cronus for swallowing their children, and she becomes angry with Zeus. And each time there needs to be the overturn in order for the next generation to come through. But with Zeus, he overthrew the Titans, but then when the other two waves came through, he overthrew them. And on the last one, he put the giants and the Cyclops into Tartarus, which angered Gaia. and she created Typhon. So with herself, with passion, with reason, and with the deepest abyss, this is where she created her offspring. And here we are. We are children of passion. We are crazy. We are followed with our emotions. What I believe is Gaia saw the crazy, emotional, passionate desires and needed balance. With Erebus and creating the ocean, she created some of that balance, but it wasn't enough because the children of Eros became too strong, too powerful, to the point where she created something out of anger. And that was our Typhon right here. So, what does this have to do with ourselves? Nature, Medusa, and the other. In all of these examples, the monsters do not have a voice. As an educator for almost 20 years, I've seen how we treat history different. When I was young, a very long time ago, it was just kind of a fact. History is written by the winners, and nobody really questioned that. Now that things have gotten more into critical thinking and giving a voice to those who didn't have a voice before, we get to hear a little bit of the stories from the Native American, from the African American, from women, the voices that were previously unheard. And so in here we also see there's a rise of narratives with the big bad wolf's side of the story, and here's Medusa's side of the story. Um, and then we think about nature, our land, our animals, resources, how much they don't have a voice. And so many people have tried to change that. In all of these instances, they're exploited for the benefit of those that are in power. So, um, again, when you look at all three of these, Medusa is definitely exploited for the benefit of those in power. Native Americans, again, African Americans, women, how women maybe treat men, immigrants. So when we think about how do we treat the other, and the last thing we look here is just kind of where the one in power kind of has a shift in the natural cycle. So, in a lot of these instances, the person in power is the one that has gone in and created some sort of system that makes it so that it's not the natural cycle. And then with Medusa, like I mentioned, the Zeus remaining in power is against the natural cycle. It should have been Typhon who came in and, Gaia's youngest child of that whole series. Typhon should have been the one to probably take out Zeus, but he did not. Um, but when I started to think about it for my own self, because always bringing it all the way back around, while I was preparing for this presentation, I was teaching summer school, and I got um, the fortune to teach the Odyssey. And one of the things we talked about a lot in the Odyssey was the idea of Xenia. And Xenia is the Greek um, way of hospitality. So when somebody would come into the home, the first thing somebody would do would be to give them a place to sit. They would give them things to drink, something to eat. They would make them comfortable. And then they would ask them their questions. Then they might say, "Who are you? Where are you coming from?" Want to hear their story. But first, they take care of their visitors' needs. And it made me think about because when I was researching Medusa, I realized she was so much more complicated, and I fell a little bit in love with her. And how we are with all of our others that we have, do we take the time to try to research them, understand them, find their culture? What is Medusa's culture as a child of Pontus, as a granddaughter of the sea instead of as a granddaughter of the sky? Do they have different ideas? Are they at war with the children of the sky? Are they, you know, is that something, or is that just in my head? So it's just kind of interesting when you start thinking about that other people. I know that sounds kind of obvious, but other people are different. They have a different culture, they have a different background, they are much more complicated. And do we take that time? And so I think about in my personal life, empathy or suspicion. Um, it, I gave my students an assignment talking about xenia and how we are with our strangers that would come into our house today. And most people wouldn't be so friendly with somebody coming into their house. Um, they would treat them with a bit of suspicion. What are you doing here? Uh, they wouldn't first sit them down, give them a cup of coffee. They would want to know, why are you here? Why are you at my door? And so it's almost with suspicion. And with my students, many of them, this was summer school. They'd all failed the class before, so many of them weren't the very best of students. They'd had a hard year for whatever reason. And I treated them with empathy. It was something instead of suspicion, instead of, I know I had a little group of students in the back that kind of chattered a lot. And somebody says, why don't you move them? Why don't you separate them? And because I treat them with empathy, they were in the classroom with me for 5 hours. I want them to enjoy the time. I want them to go ahead and chatter a little bit. I want that sort of thing. So I treated them with love. I watched them grow and actually saw students who before said, I'm not a very good student, who couldn't hardly write me a couple of sentences, writing me essays by the end of 2.5 weeks because I gave them empathy. So when you think about that idea of xenia, and then also when I was researching one of the quotes that kind of struck my attention was Hestia. They said Hestia was both the firstborn and the lastborn. If you think about it, it's kind of interesting. Hestia is the firstborn of Zeus, and he swallows each of his children as their, oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, firstborn of Kronos and Gaia. And so as they're born, he swallows each one. So Hestia is the firstborn, therefore the first swallowed. And when Zeus tricks Kronos into regurgitating his siblings, Hestia is the last to come back up because they come back in the other order. So Zeus is the last born from Gaia and Kronos, but Hestia is the last to reemerge from Kronos. So Hestia is very important, the idea of hospitality. And it's so important, in fact, that Zeus was a very big proponent of xenia. And there's two examples. There's Sisyphus, he kind of tricked the gods. So he did not have hubris, which was something, a big problem for Odysseus that we found too. His pride is what got in his way. But also Sisyphus refused to follow the rules of xenia, and instead of treating his guests with kindness, he killed his guests and sort of showed other people, like, look at me, I've killed my guest. And so Sisyphus was sent to Tartarus to spend the rest of his eternity pushing a stone up a hill. But there's also the other side where another story I kind of like, where Zeus and Hermes decide to go into a town, and they go dressed as beggars. And the first home they go to, the people, yell at them. They shut the door in their face, and they go home to home to home, and everybody is rude and not at all practicing xenia. And finally, they come to the house of this older couple. They have hardly anything, but they invite the two men in, and they say, come on in, and they give them what food they have, and they kill their goat, and they keep giving them wine. And they're worried they're running out of things, but they notice all of a sudden that where there should be no more wine, the wine has come back. And so they realize these are not regular guests, and they question them, and they say, yes, that's true. We are Zeus and Hermes, and we would like to give you any wish you would like. And They said, "We're just humble people. We don't really want anything." So they, they said, "Well, we don't really want much. We'd like to just maybe spend eternity together. We love each other very much." And so they said, "Okay, we can grant this wish." And when they died, they made them into 2 trees that got to spend eternity together. But in the meantime, they said, "Well, we've gotta move we've gotta take you somewhere else." And they said, "No, we're happy where we are." And they said, "No, we're gonna have to wipe out the entire town here because these people, when we came up, they didn't treat us as well as you do." So the entire town got killed. So the town suffered because they couldn't practice good xenia, and the other 2 were rewarded by being the gardeners for the gods. So xenia is a very important thing, and you think about in that way. And do we practice it with desire, with our own things in mind? Do we practice it with Erebus, with that coolness and rationalness, or from our own pain, Tartarus? So, what this brings me to in the end is empathy, hubris, and growth. In Reclaiming Medusa, this is my mom, and I just look at the joy in her face, and I think about, you know, family and Medusa and what family means and who Medusa may have been, and just kind of making sure to think about all of the others that we encounter, all the people outside of ourselves in that way, and not have so much um, pride and learn to grow. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation today. My side uh, little thing we do is mythology and art workshops, and I call it Gallimor's Transformations. If you ever want to contact me, I love to hear new theories about Medusa, monsters, mythology. This is my email here, Dr. Tracy Mars at gmail.com. And I have a couple websites that I not so regularly update. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation and have a wonderful day.